Hey everybody, I want to share with you a personal story today which just came up in my mind and thinking, and felt that just for some reason I need to share it with you. So this is a picture of me. Look at that, that's so cute. This is 1956, the year of my birth, and this picture's probably taken early July of 1956. It was taken immediately after a very serious situation, which is the one that I want to talk to you about today. In June of 1956, when I was 3 months old, my mother got very concerned because she'd noticed one morning that I appeared to be bringing up through my mouth the contents that should have been coming out at the other end. And it seemed that the contents of my bowel were somehow finding their way up and out of my mouth. That was my mother's perception and experience. She immediately got in touch with the doctor, who, on hearing the symptoms, said, "We need to get the child into hospital immediately. Something is very seriously wrong." So I was rushed off to Pontefract General Infirmary. And within a very short space of time, I was down in theatre having emergency surgery. And initially, I was misdiagnosed. It was thought that the problem was an inguinal hernia, which is fairly common in children and babies. But after mistreatment, it was discovered that actually I had a femoral hernia, which is extremely rare in children, and particularly in males. And in a baby of my age, 3 months, this surgeon had never encountered it, never come across it, never expected it. Hence the reason for the misdiagnosis. But when they did get in there and find out what was going on, this femoral hernia had strangulated. That's what was causing the symptoms. And it had caused a bowel blockage, and of course now here I am, 3 months old, requiring major surgery to fix this problem and remove the part of the bowel that was dying due to the problem. And so it turned out pretty major surgery. The outcome of that was that when I came out of surgery and went into intensive care, was put in an oxygen tent. And my parents were called in to speak to the surgeon. And the surgeon was extremely apologetic to my parents. My dad can relive that moment like it was yesterday. And the terminology he used to them was, he said, he held his right hand up apparently and said, "I wish I could cut my hand off here for the trauma that I have caused your child." Now, you'd never do that today. And, these were not the days of litigation culture. So the surgeon was very honest. He said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "But I need you to understand that from what I had to treat and the way it has gone and the problems that we encountered and the delay through misdiagnosis," he said, "I need to tell you I'm so very, very sorry, but there is no hope. Your son is going to die. He will not survive." Well, Mum and Dad apparently had popped in to see me before they saw the surgeon, seen me fast asleep, as they thought, in the oxygen tent, thought I was looking pretty well, really. And so they'd said to him, "Well, we've just seen him and he looks okay." And the surgeon said, "No, I assure you," he said, this is terminal. Your son will not recover, and you need to get a grip of yourselves and be aware. It's now just a matter of time that your son is going to die." He apologized to them. And my parents, again, with a non-litigation culture, they thanked him for being honest, thanked him for sharing. There was no threat of solicitors and lawyers and courts and barristers. It was thank you for what you've done. We're sure you did your best. And so that was the situation. I lasted the next 2 days in critical care. Was not improving, was gradually getting worse. And of course, back in those days as well, parents used to be sent home, even though that was the situation. And so my parents had been sent away, and being the people they were, with a very, very deep faith and a real solid belief in God. I mean, beautiful, wonderful parents. They having come back on the one evening, were in a prayer meeting at the church that they attended, when a neighbour, because nobody had telephones then much in those days, and they didn't have a telephone, never mind a cell phone, a mobile phone. Neighbour burst into the church apologising, but called for mum and dad and said, "I've just had the hospital on the phone. They said you to get there immediately. If you don't go now, you will not see your son alive. So you must get there quickly, immediately." So mum and dad immediately went out. Their pastor at that time, a guy called Selwyn Hughes, went with them down to the hospital. My gran, who was also an incredible woman of faith, she apparently had been baking at home, turned up at the hospital still with all the flour baking powder on her, and pinnies, which everybody wore back then. Remember the old pinnies? The four of them were there at the hospital because it was extremely bad news. They were expecting me to die sometime within the next couple of hours. And of course, my dad was too upset. He was so emotionally distraught at this that he just couldn't go in at that time. He was finding it real difficult when they arrived. So mum and the pastor went in, and my gran came into the intensive care where I was, critical care. And Dad tells this story, that the pastor came and they asked if he could lay hands on me. They let him put his hands inside the oxygen tent, and he prayed for me that God would do a miracle, and that in spite of what the doctors had said, that health would come into my body. I don't know what you believe about this stuff. Some of you will be very skeptical, whatever, and that's fine. I don't contend with that. I'm just sharing the story as it is and as it's been relayed and witnessed by several to me. And so he prayed for me, and then he left. And I lasted out the next couple of hours, and the night time came, and as also was the custom then, they said to mum and dad, "You need to go home, you need to get some rest, and if things change, we'll get a message to you, or please call in the morning if you've not heard from us." And of course, anxiously, my father in the morning, he went to the local telephone box, the telephone booth, and he called the hospital very early. Couldn't wait, was so anxious. They'd just been, his words were extremely at peace, but very concerned. And when he called the hospital, got through to the ward, he recalled this to me many, many times, and mum did also, that the nurse said, "I'm so glad that you've called. I was going to try and get the message to you, but these are the literal words." And Dad has always said this, and Mum, this was the literal words. She said, I don't know how to explain this, but a miracle's happened. She said, instead of your son dying in the night, she said he was very, very peaceful. And this morning he woke up and immediately began to cry, but not from pain, but for a feed. And so we fed him. And as soon as we'd fed him, he had a bowel movement, which of course was incredibly important in the context of the surgery that I had. And she said he had a normal bowel movement. He's now resting again very peacefully. The doctor's been to see him, and we're amazed. And, you can come in and see him today, but we just don't know how to explain what's happened. Well, 2 days after that, I was home. So 1 week after being admitted and being given an unavoidable death sentence, I was home and well. And this is where this comes from. This is me. This is the record of little Anthony back home after all that trauma. Now, in case you wonder about, is this story been exaggerated? I have a full record of it. I have the medical records about it, and I have a full record of the events around it. fully written out for me. And also on top of that, the surgeon who did the operation, he investigated this case 6 years later. He'd moved to another hospital in Farnham, was the head of surgery there. And he investigated the case, found out that I was still alive, and found my parents' address. And he wrote a letter to my parents, which I now have locked away, because he was so shocked about what had happened that had no explanation, that he wrote to them 6 years later and asked, how is the boy doing? Has there been any lasting after effects? He could barely believe that I would be just alive and well and normal and going along. And I still have that letter. It's very precious to me as a testament to how sick I was, the genuine concern of the surgeon who did the operation, and what I believe was the miracle of my recovery, for which I'm very glad. So the 2 hours that I was given to live have turned into over 500,000 hours, bringing me to 64, for which I'm very grateful. And hopefully I've been able to make my life count a little bit up to this time, and hopefully for the years that I have, that I'll still be able to make it count for the grace that touched my life. Now, I know for some of you, you have had traumas, and you have had loved ones that have died, and situations that have happened that you wish could have been different. So in no way am I saying this to self-promote, or nor do I want to cause you any pain and disillusionment from this. But what I did want to share is that these things are real, and these things do happen. And for all of you listening to me today, there is a point that I want to get through to you, and it's around this, that there is a realm of reality that's largely invisible to the natural eye, that seems to hang around and pop its head up at times and in ways that are not fully controllable, and they're not fully predictable, yet they're nevertheless undeniable. And I think it matters that we do not let this ingrained part of our being go to waste. The ancient Celtic Christians used to talk about thin places. They called some places thin places. And what they meant, it was their best way of explaining that somehow we find a space where the distance between heaven and earth, where the distance between the seen and the unseen world was so thin that they used to say it was less than a yard. What they were really trying to get through is you could in essence reach your arm through and reach into the unseen world and pull back into the seen world that which was in there, which was the realm of miracle, the realm of the unpredictable, the invisible, the mystery. And that's what the Celts called it. So I don't know, maybe that oxygen tent that I was in 1956, somehow there was a thin place there, and the unseen came through, and I'm very grateful for it. And I'm just praying for you that you will in your life and in your situations find thin places where the unexpected, the extraordinary comes through. And maybe at this time it's a good time for that to be a reality for you. What I do know is that all this arena is affected by paradox. You understand? Paradox is two things that are in conflict with each other, and yet each one equally is true in its own right. That's a paradox. You can't make sense of a paradox. It just is. And I don't know why, this arena of like the miracle that happened to me, and I've watched it happen to others, and I've watched it not happen in some lives. It's a paradox, but we must never let this hope or expectation die just because it is paradoxical. It's the realm of mystery. It's the realm of miracle. It's that which is unexplainable by solely logical processes of deduction that does exist. And quantum physics has a similar thing that it calls a potentiality. Okay, potentiality, potential within what is happening for something different, something new to emerge that was unexpected. And maybe there are some things that are just uncircumscribable by human boundaries. And we become fools if we try. Understand the term uncircumscribable. To circumscribe something is when you draw a circle around it, like circling the wagons, you draw a circle around it. But I think the area that these things work in are uncircumscribable with human boundaries. So I think we just should not try to figure out how to put a circle around it. It's just, for me, this is really what I'm wanting to say today. No matter what your experience, and even though you will come face to face with paradox, always leave room for mystery and for miracle. You know, Jesus is recorded as saying, all things are possible to the one who believes. Now, I don't think that's a test of, if you have great faith, you'll get what others won't get who don't have any faith. I think really it's just an issue of believing in the possibility, not the inevitability, but believing in the possibility that although wrapped in paradox, does release mystery and does release miracle, and can touch our lives in such an unexplainable way as what touched my life 64 years ago back in 1956. So if Jesus said all things are possible to the one who believes, plant that somewhere deep in your spirit today, and who knows what that might begin for you.